Hey, ladies and gents, and welcome to the Controlled Interest Gamecast, where we talk about video games and everything happening in the industry. I'm your host, Jerrad Wyche. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Dominic Orlando.
It is great to be here with you today, Jerrad.
Great. Episode 269. Hey, nice.
Nice.
We're going to be covering, we got a pretty packed Quickie news, which is turning into like a not-so-Quickie news. And then I guess for the topic of the show, I just wanted to do a review roundup for Wo Long Fallen Dynasty, which is the new release coming out this week. Unfortunately, it doesn't come out to the 3rd. We're recording this on the 2nd, so neither of us have had our chance to dip in ourselves, which we'll probably have those impressions next week. So, starting off, we got there's a lot of news that's pretty prevalent towards our interests, Dom, which is good. So, we're starting off with some Elden Ring news. DLC was finally announced in a tweet on a random Tuesday, which was February 28th. FromSoftware finally announced, yeah, very. It was like, I think it was like 1 o'clock a.m. Japanese time too, or so, it was something weird in terms of like when people make announcements. They finally announced DLC for Elden Ring with the following tweet, quote, "Rise, Tarnished, and let us walk a new path together. An upcoming expansion for Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erd Tree, is currently in development. We hope you look forward to new adventures in the lands between," end quote. That was the tweet. So, this came with some artwork as well. So, details in the official art released have the fandom believing that the story will revolve around Michaela of the Halig Tree, who is the demigod twin brother of the infamous Elden Ring boss, Millennia, who's optional, but obviously the internet fell in love with her, or fell in hate with her, I guess, depending on who you ask. And we'll get to that in just a moment of what the DLC could focus on, but I wanted to read this part too. So a report came out regarding the DLC's release window. In the report from Executor, sources have revealed that the planned release window for Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon is between September and October of 2023. The report continues, quote, "Unless further eternally delayed, there are more chances for the title to launch in late September," end quote. It has also been said that FromSoftware intend on releasing Armored Core 6 before releasing the highly anticipated Elden Ring DLC that was revealed just this week, titled Shadow of the Erd Tree. So I guess let's talk about the release of the DLC first, Dom, and then we'll get into what it could possibly be about. Are you believing this, that, yeah, it makes sense that they'd probably want to focus on getting their big new release out? I guess big, maybe not necessarily, but their new release out and then worrying about the DLC?
Yeah, and that lines up with the way that tweet was worded, to say that it's in development.
Yeah.
That sounds like, eventually kind of a situation, instead of if they were to word it like coming soon, or just something omitted anything like that at all, then I would think there's a chance it's, this summer or early fall, kind of a situation. But yeah, the way they worded that tweet and then combined with this report, it does feel like we might be looking into, could it be next year? It seems odd that it could be that far away.
Well,
if they're announcing it now.
We don't know how far along the DLC is necessarily. I could see a world where the Armored Core 6 comes out in September and then the DLC comes out in late November, early December. Because it'd be totally a FromSoftware move to have a release that doesn't give two shits about the Game Awards. You know what I mean? It's just like, we don't care about that. Yeah, and I think there's also a world in which, like you said, it could possibly come out next year, though would be odd. But it could totally be a thing where they got the key art done for the announcement, and then it's like, well, let's actually work on it. And then it's not worrisome in that it seems like FromSoftware always has multiple teams working on multiple projects at any given point. Like, this isn't something out of the ordinary for them. And I'm assuming the way they handle resources there too will change as Armored Core 6 comes to a close and when it goes gold. In terms of what the game's going to be about, I haven't fully done my Vata Vidya full deep dive into Elden Ring lore, so I'm not as familiar with everything as I am with like Dark Souls in terms of characters and all that stuff, but I am loosely familiar with the Millennia Michaela situation. Do you know, have you dove into that a little bit? Are you familiar with what this DLC could possibly mean? Because the artwork showed him potentially riding on, what's the name of the horse? Torrent. I was like, yeah, remember there was a whole conspiracy that they named the horse Torrent, so when people search Elden Ring Torrent, he would come up and not like links to actual torrents. That's funny. Anyways, yeah, so are you familiar with the lore here of what it could possibly be?
No, I'm with you. I remember looking into it a bit, well, actually, shortly after finishing Elden Ring. But since then, and it's been a while now, almost coming up on a year in the next month or two here. So, yeah, I have to go and refresh myself on some of the lore to get a better idea of where we're at. And then, yeah, maybe especially as we get more information from FromSoftware about this DLC to give us some hints too. Because, yeah, I feel like I'm out of the loop a little bit now. It's been a while.
Yeah, and honestly, I think this DLC gives me an excuse to go deep dive into the Vatavidia stuff and really get familiar with it, because then I can just build my own hype for it, because he does a really good job at putting the lore together. But even then, like, a demigod that's the twin brother of, like, one of the most badass characters in Elden Ring, that alone, even if you don't dive in, is it's sick. Why is he on the back of Torrent? What's going on with the what's the name of the DLC? The Erd Tree, like Shadow of the Erd Tree. Does it mean like we're going into the depths or something, or some alternate world, as it tends to be like with Dark Souls? A lot of times it was the painted worlds. So we'll see what happens. Very exciting. Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon is a game that, like, we don't get very many like mech games like that, and I trust FromSoftware. And for me, it's funny where Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League is like an IP. I'm all in unless it comes out and it's not great. And as we've seen stuff, it's like, it's not great. Armored Core 6 is like the opposite end of, like, I'm not really interested in the IP, but I'm interested in the developer. And the only way where I likely wouldn't hop into this day one is if it like got really bad reviews, because I trust FromSoftware and I'm interested to see a different genre from them. So that'll be fun. And
I'm with you on that too, because I've read a little bit about Armored Core. Apparently, it's really, there's a heavy emphasis on not necessarily RPG elements, but like stats and I guess numbers, that kind of thing.
Like
and
min-maxing your mech and stuff.
And builds and that kind of stuff too. Like there's a whole meta around all that, which I didn't expect. It's kind of caught me off guard. I thought I'm picturing more like action kind of mech game, but I think I have a lot of ignorance around this series. But every part
Most
of it,
people,
I'm like,
it's not like Dark Souls. I think it's like it's the first thing, the very niche, like gamers are like, I know Armored Core. Most people don't.
Right. And so, like, for me, it's like there's basically nothing about it that sounds interesting to me except for the fact that FromSoftware is making it. So it's going to be probably a tough sell for me in any case. But I definitely will keep an eye on it because I don't know, I kind of like to see how FromSoft does and tend to root for them.
I have a slight connection to Mecha, like the Gundam series and stuff like that. And even the revealed trailer is super sick. Like, I love giant robots shooting shit. And it's interesting because I do think an audience that might catch on to this a little bit, and not the same way, because like for Metal Gear Solid, it's very much Kojima and the eccentric characters and all the weirdness there. And I'm not saying that this will necessarily have those parts, but the Metal Gear aspects of Metal Gear with the cool robots and shit, I think there is an audience from that fandom starving for something similar to that, as well as like the Gundam audience too, who is kind of relegated to what most anime fans are relegated to, which are these like okay games licensed based on the property. Like, outside of Dragon Ball Fighters, we don't really get these like premier AAA high quality anime games, unfortunately. So we'll see what happens. Speaking of high quality though, we got some clarification for that PlayStation showcase happening this year, Dom. So from a recent episode of Game Mess Decides, which is Jeff Grubb's podcast, Jeff Grubb of Giant Bomb, he added to his reveal that a PlayStation showcase will occur in 2023 before E3 timing, which we already knew about. He also talked about the state of play, and then it happened. He specifically clarified the following, quote, and this is all his words, I'm going to read it verbatim, quote, Sony itself is saving its own actual good stuff for something else, which is what's happening here. Because people were asking like why the state of play was kind of lackluster in some aspects. They're saving the good stuff for the PlayStation showcase. That's what's going to happen before E3. It was supposed to happen last fall, but they kept pushing it back because their developers weren't ready to show things. But now those developers are ready. They're going to have a massive show that really sets up the second phase of the PlayStation 5, end quote. Now, for all of you non-Marvel dorks out there, the phase thing is really cool because the whole cinematic universe for Marvel was set up in phases, and it also culminated with phase 3 at the end with Thanos, and it's kind of a way to section off these stories, and it's easier for people to digest him in that way. And it's cool because people were wondering, well, what's the next stage for PlayStation? What is the next phase? Because we've talked about this, Dom, all of their major releases really after God of War Ragnarok, the only thing we know about right now is Marvel's Spider-Man 2. I mean, that's loosely speaking, we know Naughty Dog's working on their next game. We know Sony Santa Monica's already working on their next project. But in terms of like announcements, the only major player we have is Marvel's Spider-Man 2. So this could, honestly, this has the makings to be a pretty dope showcase, Dom. And after the State of Play last week when we were reviewing it, I said, because this one is lackluster, I think it's going to raise a lot of people's expectations for this next one. And if what Jeff Grubb's saying is going to be true, which I have a lot of trust in Jeff Grubb, I'm pretty excited that just the idea of setting up the second phase of PlayStation 5, that's dope, right?
Yeah, it's a cool way to put it. And what it also kind of reminded me of as I went to look at Star Wars Jedi Survivor, like that game, and kind of, I think we talked about it when it was first announced, but I realized that game is next gen only, right? Or current gen only. So that's not going to be on PS4 and Xbox One.
Wild for EA too, a publisher that usually sticks along for a long time on those older gens.
Right, get things out as many places as possible to maximize sales or whatever. But yeah, so that kind of made me feel like, oh, you know what? I'm glad for that. Obviously, that's a bummer for people who haven't been able to get new consoles yet, but I look forward to that. And I'm thinking to myself also, it's been since 2023 now, and these consoles came out in 2020, and we're still, for the most part, making games for the old console versions too. So that's kind of how I am in my head. I'm also dividing up like the second phase of
right, good point
of PS5 is like maybe games that are going to start to be exclusive to just this newer generation, and then looking specifically at PlayStation was obviously it was a big fuss when God of War and Horizon were revealed to be across both gens too, right? So I don't remember if we've talked about or if we know if that's the case for Spider-Man 2 or not.
I'll look that up while you continue.
Okay, yeah. But I feel like that would be a good pivot point as a part of this, next phase of like with Spider-Man and then whatever Sony Bend is doing and Naughty Dog and down the line, like can we start really focusing on maxing out like the newer consoles specifically? I think that's cool. And I'm hoping that that's part of what they mean by, or what's being interpreted by Grubb at least. So like, that's kind of how I'm thinking about it.
Okay, so I'm looking at the blog post that they did on December 15th. Remember that? The hey, Spider-Man 2 is happening. Remember, like right after the Game Awards?
Cool.
And in it says, the release window for the web-slinging sequel Marvel Spider-Man 2 launches on PS5 in fall 2023. So it just says PS5.
Yeah, and obviously they've been not Insomniac, actually yes, Insomniac, because that was the other one. Miles Morales was supposed to be, or we were like led to believe it was going to be next gen only, and that ended up not being the case also. So the fact that they say it's coming to PS5, that for sure doesn't mean it's not coming to PS4 too. It could have just been unmentioned, and then maybe they're going to wait till the last possible minute, like they did with Miles Morales, to let us know, like, oh yeah, it's coming to the old one too. Basically, I don't really trust Sony to be clear and direct all the time.
So I'm looking at this from 2 weeks ago, February 14th. It was confirmed that it will release exclusively for PS5 via a tweet by PlayStation.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah. So
and
still take it with a grain of salt. Who knows?
Yeah.
But that gets me excited as well.
It wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world if they ended up not being true. Still.
Yeah. But I mean, their developers are so talented. There comes a point where I think maybe Sony does hear the feedback of, we just want to develop for one platform because it makes our games that much better, Not to say that like God of War and Horizon were necessarily hindered by it, but I do think it possibly could have led to God of War Ragnarok feeling as close to what it did to the original 2018 game as opposed to like a leap. So who knows? We'll see. Next up, this is a bit of a short one. You kind of actually mentioned the franchise. Star Wars Jedi Trilogy, very likely happening. So the director of Respawn's Star Wars Jedi series, Stig Asmussen, has said he wants to make a trilogy of games. And, when the first game was announced, it's Star Wars, you automatically assume it's going to be a trilogy. It's just how human minds work with entertainment. Things work best in threes, especially in the world of video games, it seems like. And according to Jeff Grubb of Giant Bomb, the assumption among the team I've heard is that as long as Survivor does fine, they will begin working on another Jedi game. And when I sent this to you, you had a funny comment. What was it, Dom?
Yeah, I think it's going to do a bit more than fine, right?
Yeah, for sure.
First game, I don't remember the specific numbers, but I think it did quite well. And obviously, sequels tend to do even better than what came before them, right? So, again, I also did just mention this is going to be out on less platforms. It's going to be next gen only, so that could be a hindrance to it. But I don't doubt that this game is going to do really well, and that we're going to get the third one. It seems like it seems obvious. So this is great news to me, of course. So I'm excited for this. It's coming soon though. Like later this month. I forget the date, but I'm just so pumped for this game. Like, you know, we got Starfield coming later this year. And even Tears of the Kingdom I'm looking forward to. But honestly, like, I really want to be in my Star Wars zone right now. I'm ready for give me some Cal Kestis, some Ser, and some Marin, and that little fuzzy guy. I forget his name, but God bless him.
Greasy, baby. Greasy money.
Greasy. That's right, of course. Greasy money.
So looking at the sales for the first game, Electronic Arts confirmed that Jedi Star Wars Fallen Order had the fastest selling digital launch for any Star Wars game within its first 2 weeks on sale. By March 31st, 2020, it had sold more than 10 million units. And in June of 2021, the game had attracted more than 20 million players. So not necessarily sales total. Yeah, I'm excited, man. I've kind of been media blackout for this for a while because I just don't want to see anything. But people who have been watching the gameplay that they've been demoing and all of the new systems and stuff has me excited because what they're saying is the first one, even though it was a good game, it served more as like a proof of concept for what this franchise could be. And it seems like this one, they're kind of running full bore. Respawn's really delivering and building upon what they did with the first game. So I'm very excited.
There is even a novel that just got released, I think, or maybe is about to get released this week, of basically the events between the previous game
an interstitial,
and this game.
Yeah,
exactly. That I've been debating, like, do I want to crack that open? Like, maybe I'll. It's too close now. I can't finish reading a book that fast anyway. Too much going on. But I think it kind of speaks to I'm so zoned in on like every offshoot and every comic and novel Star Wars related that comes out, probably more than most people. But I still think that can speak to like the popularity of this franchise specifically with Cal Kestis and the Jedi franchise. It's just I hate the naming convention still, but okay.
We talked about Star Wars, which is a media property that came to video games. Now let's talk about a game that's going to be coming to media properties. Dead by Daylight plus Blumhouse. So Brent Lang of Variety has reported Atomic Monster, which is James Wan's production company, the director of a lot of horror movies and Aquaman. Atomic Monster and Blumhouse are teaming up with Behavior Interactive to develop a feature film adaptation of the hit horror multiplayer game Dead by Daylight. The companies are commencing their search for a director and a screenwriter for the project. Quote, "We know there are so many fans of Dead by Daylight out there and think it's imperative we find someone who appreciates and loves the world as much as we do to help us bring the game for the big screen," said Jason Blum, Blumhouse founder and CEO. "We know our partners at Behavior and Atomic Monster will help us bring the best version of this game to life." End quote. Last week we talked about Blumhouse Games, their initiative to go into gaming publishing with smaller indie developers to begin with. And I guess one part we didn't really think about was with them trying to familiarize themselves with the gaming industry, Dom, this was also bound to happen. We're like, hey, this gaming franchise seems like it'd be a perfect project for us to take on as a production house. And I think a lot of people don't understand that Dead by Daylight, they see it and they're like, oh, it's the horror game where they just get a bunch of licensed killers from other properties and you play as them. It actually has all of its own lore and characters in it as well. There was a hot minute where I was very much into Dead by Daylight playing with my friends. It's a very fun game. And outside of the, Freddy Kruegers and Jasons and all of the known quantities there are original monsters and original characters in this whole like deep-rooted lore with them and stuff too. And we may not talk about it often, but Dead by Daylight has one of the strongest fandoms in gaming. Like if you just dip your toe in there, You know, you know, a fandom is huge, and it's terrible to say this, but it's true. You know, a fandom has reached popularity, Dom, when there's a very prominent toxic part of that fandom.
Oh yeah,
That's
yep.
just how it is. Unfortunately, we've seen this with Rick and Morty, Star Wars, yada yada yada. Yeah, Dead by Daylight, the fandom is huge. I know you would probably never play the game because you're not a multiplayer type guy, but Blumhouse making a movie based on this, does that intrigue you at all? Because I know you're a horror film buff, much more than I am.
Yeah, definitely. It'll be on the radar. I'm that person you described where I don't know anything about Dead by Daylight, and all I've seen is the releases about like, oh, now Freddy Krueger's in it, now Jason's in it, and so on and so on. And that's all I know, except that yeah, multiplayer, asynchronous or whatever, or not asynchronous, but yeah, PvP.
Asymmetrical, I think, is the word you're looking for.
Yeah, asymmetrical. But yeah, so my knowledge of it is super limited. So that's good to. That's what I was gonna ask and hoping you knew. So that it's good to hear that they do have their own lore and stuff going on. I'm like, what is this story? What is this movie gonna be built off of? So yeah, but this will be on my radar. This could be cool.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see if they take the dark horror route, or if it's a little bit more campy, or maybe it's something that actually like pokes fun at the tropes of the horror genre. Because I think they could do a pretty good job with that too. Because the game itself includes all of these people from different franchises. So we'll see what happens. Interesting stuff there. Next up, Telltale Games update and rumor. So in an official tweet, Telltale Games announced that Wolf Among Us 2 will no longer release in 2023. We talked about this in our Discord, and I was like, I don't know if anybody really thought that this game was coming out this year. I was under the assumption like there's no shot. And then friend of the show, Chris Nunes, mentioned like, well, yeah, they're also working on a new engine, so that's probably giving them troubles too. And with Telltale, we know that a big problem as to why they failed the first time around is a lack of production coordination, and just everything there was messed up, from the financials to the planning of a release. So yeah, take their time. Don't worry about it. We're not in a rush. But this follow-up here, IGN revealed that Telltale Games is working on a third unknown title in very early development, in addition to The Expanse and The Wolf Among Us 2.
Oh, that's right, The Expanse.
I never played The Wolf Among Us 2, the original one. I only played the first episode, and then I never got back around to it. And I think what I'm planning to do is when this one releases, because I think it's going to be releasing with all of it, all 5 episodes, or how many episodes they do, I want to play through the first one and play through that one. And then with The Expanse, I'm actually currently watching through the hit sci-fi show. I'm in season 2 right now, and I got interested in it because The Expanse is based on the book series of the same name. The first book is called Leviathan Wakes, which is such a dope name for a book. Like, the moment I saw the title for that book, I was like, interesting. And the cool thing about The Expanse is it tackles sci-fi in a very like hard sci-fi way. So it uses a lot of like actual science. Obviously, there's a lot of fiction involved, but it tries to base as much as it can into hard science, which is really neat. And a season and a bit through, I'm really enjoying it. So I'm very interested in that too. And I haven't looked into if it follows the same story or if it's like a side story, kind of like what The Walking Dead did. And I don't want to look into it because I don't want to spoil the show for myself. But yeah, who knows what the third project is? There's no shot they return to Walking Dead, right?
That would shock me. It could be
them being a part with Skybound now. I wonder if an Invincible project could be like Telltale Invincible, which would be pretty neat.
Could be interesting. There could be a lot of different ways you could go with that too. They just done so many different things, different ways. Like you mentioned, like with Walking Dead, they did same world, but just totally different people, different places. But theoretically, there could have been crossover if they had
Guardians original story. Obviously, that one wasn't as beloved. Batman original story, right?
Original story.
Wow.
The interesting one, which not as many people like, but Game of Thrones, they did kind of similar to Walking Dead, where it was like different characters in the same world. But you actually do see some of the characters from that show, which is very minimally. I liked it too.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the criticisms were at the time, but yeah, so like they've shown, and I don't know how many people are still there from those days, but I feel like they've shown that they could do a lot of different things, like within the same world, adjacent to it, original stories, like so many different options. So like, yeah, maybe they'll do more. I mean, it'd be cool if they did more Batman. I'd be into that too, because both of those games are really cool that they did, or something. Yeah, totally different IP. Actually, I would say it'll be really cool if it was something new, at least to me, like The Wolf Among Us was. So like, I recommend finishing that when you get the chance, like before the new one comes out. But I had never heard of any of that story before. So even if it was like something that's based on something else that I hadn't heard of, like that's exciting to me. Just as much as like, yeah, more Batman would be or something like that. So yeah, that I'm curious to see where they end up going.
I'd even love if they partnered with like other, like what if Xbox paid them to develop like a platform exclusive Telltale's Fallout? I think that'd be really neat.
Oh yeah, a fall, yeah.
Yeah,
Because I'm ready for that Amazon show too.
me too. Can't wait. Yeah, so we'll see what happens with Telltale. I don't know. Were you with me in that you didn't expect that game to come out this year, or assumed it probably wouldn't?
Not really. I remember when it got announced, and it was kind of like, yeah, eventually. Because then they said that it was early or something. Even then, they never made it feel confident that it was coming soon. So, yeah, I kind of seeing this announcement that it was delayed into 2024. I was kind of with you of like, oh yeah, sure. I didn't really expect it anytime soon anyway. So take your time, yo.
Yeah, I mean the years of bathing in the cynicism of waiting for the Hollow Knight Silk Song release date. I'm just like, yeah,
Man.
nothing's coming out in the year they say until we get a
How do
firm
we
date.
still not know when Hollow Knight's coming out, man?
I know. Hey, maybe it's in that. I wouldn't expect it to be in the PlayStation Showcase because I think that's going to focus on big AAA big boys. But dude, if July ends and we don't know about Hollow Knight Silk Song, I'm gonna actually be worried about Team Cherry. Like, did they get abducted?
Yeah.
Did like an alien race come and abduct them? And that's why we were seeing all of these balloons and weird stuff. And they're like, "You're one of the best game developers. We need you to make video games for us on Bleak Blorp." we're long game developers. We're taking Team
Yeah.
Cherry. I don't know. It's the only reason I can come with. Let's get into some Wolong Fallen Dynasty review roundups. So this is from various sources. So the latest release from developer Team Ninja and publisher Koei Tecmo. Wolong Fallen Dynasty is releasing on March 3rd, the day before we're recording this podcast, and reviews have begun pouring out. Let's take a look at the generally positive reviews from several outlets around the industry. It currently sits at an 82 on Metacritic and OpenCritic, with 85% of critics recommending it on OpenCritic. Shout out to you. This is going to earn you about 11, 12 points on our Fantasy Critics League, which is good. I think, honestly, anything above an 80 or an 80 is a good pick because that's 10 points. So
I definitely was hoping for more based on the scores
sure,
that Neo 1 and 2 got, but still very, very good score for me.
yeah, I mean, I think all your games have been above an 80 so far. Maybe one was a 79? Maybe not.
We're batting pretty consistently so far, so I'm pretty happy with my scores.
I know, and a lot of your games have come out more recently, so I only have like 2 games out, so it's like your score is way more ballooned. Let's get to these reviews, though. So first up, we have Alejandro Castillo from Mary Station, which from what I looked is actually a Spanish review site, which is really cool. And on OpenCritic, they do a good job of translating the sections of the review over. So Castillo writes, quote, Wolong Fallen Dynasty is going head-on from the start. The new Souls-like from Team Ninja returns to a solid, addictive combat. It is a hallmark of the team. Risk has its reward. Mechanics added to the formula, such as the morale system, influence the development of levels. From the moment you enter a mission, you activate the chip to achieve everything and destroy everything that comes your way. It's hard not to recommend it to fans of the genre. Only the limitation of the bestiary and the uninteresting loot system keep it from going one step further. And he gave it an 85. Next, Mitchell Saltzman from IGN gave it an 80. Quote, Wolong Fallen Dynasty is another great entry in Team Ninja's growing collection of action RPGs that feature some of the best combat in the Souls-like genre, even though those battles start to lose their tension due to the distinct lack of enemy variety to fill out the 20-plus hour runtime, end quote. Next up, so yeah, he talked about maybe it being a little bit too long in the tooth, which is a criticism that seems pretty apparent in a lot of the reviews. Next up, Chris Carter from Destructoid, who gave it a 90. Quote, I want to stress that Wolong is not going to be for everyone. It can be extremely punishing, especially if you're butting heads with the parry system, but the setting, aesthetics, and action sensibilities from a learned team made it all worth it to push through and get over that hump, end quote. It's pretty succinct, but I think a lot of these guys are also stressing, hey, just be weary. If you're not a Souls-like person, this probably isn't for you, which I think is good to mention. Next up, we have Elijah Gonzalez over at Game Informer, given an 88. Even as its second half failed to match what came earlier, Wolong Fallen Dynasty is a finely honed delight. Its action is precise and responsive, and learning the intricacies of each adversary is exceedingly fulfilling. While I wish its backstretch was either pared down or had a wider variety of foes, this is a rare title that induces trance-like focus and euphoric moments of victory. It may not quite reach the heights of the works that inspired it, but it's not far off, end quote. I really like that write-up. I think it does a good job of basically saying like, hey, it has some weaknesses. It maybe doesn't reach what you'd expect from like a From title, but that doesn't mean it isn't worthwhile. So Elijah Gonzalez, good on that write-up. Very, very good usage of the English language. And last up, we have John Bales, I believe it's pronounced, from Games Radar, another of the lower spectrum of reviews. He gave it an 80, which, I mean, it's still fantastic. 80 is a really great score, but, quote, ultimately, though, no matter how many times you stare into the eyes of the tiger, what counts most here is, well, the thrill of the fight, rising up to the challenge of your rivals. When you meet the target or most fearsome foe when you meet largest or most fearsome foe head on, remain steadfast and push aside their best combo like a martial arts master before spearing them through the gut. It's irresistibly It's irresistibly exhilarating. Wolong's cocktail of measured inputs and furious blows alone should keep the focused warrior going to the end. Keep calm and parry on. A lot of really cool words from these reviewers. They did a very good job of painting a picture. So it seems clear if you're not a fan of the genre, tread carefully. A lot of them mention that the game seems to go a little bit too long in the tooth, and towards the back half of the game, it tends to lack in enemy variety. I've also heard complaints that the visual fidelity suffers in low-light areas for the game. Very interesting stuff. None of this turns me off. I think a lot of the stuff they're talking about is like, hey, if you're a fan of the genre, hop right in. Very interested to see how it vibes with me. The long runtime is worrisome because, for me anyways, Dom, I don't mind playing the Dark Souls and Elden Rings for 50 plus hours because those worlds are ultimately engaging throughout for me. With this, where they're talking about how it tends to suffer on the back half, the enemy variety isn't great. Another criticism I've heard is that the difficulty pacing and scaling is very weird. Like, it's basically like you'll have like a plateau and then a steep hill and then a plateau and then a steep, like it doesn't seem like it's paced out very well, where I believe Blessing from Kind of Funny said like the first boss is pretty difficult and you kind of coast for a while and then I hit a wall that took me 2 days, were his words. And Andy Cortez of Kind of Funny also talked about it, like the pacing in it's a little weird, where it just feels like there's a lot of easy and then something punches you in the mouth and then it's kind of like it doesn't seem like it flows very well in that way. So who knows? Hearing all of these words, I want to hear from you, how you sit a day away from being able to play this game. What are your worries? What are your excitements? Give it to me. Give it all to me, Dom.
Yeah. So it sounds like the loot system is the same as it was in Neo. And that's like, it is so minute. It's so like detailed and like every, like if you don't like numbers and percentages and any kind of like all those little attributes and like special effects and all that kind of stuff and constantly getting new loot and trading it in or upgrading it or creating new stuff out of it, all that kind of stuff, like constantly, then this would be tough for you. From the sounds of it, if it, that's how Neo was, because that part of that game took me a while to really get into. That being said, if you do really get into that loot system, you're probably gonna get into it, and it's kind of how I picture people in Destiny are, because that's not me, but the way like each new piece of armor or weapon you get like contributes towards an overall level, and like you're constantly swapping it out and all that kind of stuff. Like it feels like it appeals to a very specific part of some people's brains in that regard. So it sounds like that's still here, which I'm not. It's tough to get into, but I feel like I may end up just getting into it again. And like you really got to go all in, otherwise it's probably just gonna annoy you, because you can ignore all the extra loot, but then like you're constantly gonna have to be selling it and getting rid of it, and it's like you're gonna be doing all these tasks and for not really any gain. But that being said, the difficulty stuff is interesting to me, because Neo just got harder and harder as it went on. After like the initial like figuring it out, like first couple levels where you get your shit rocked as always in Souls-like games, then yeah, you start to adjust a little bit, but then just gets harder and harder, and like, damn, it was hard, like super hard. Probably like on par with like Sekiro, and that kind of thing. So I'm kind of more interested to hear that like there's parts that are easier, even if it means like they're not paced that well and it doesn't feel natural. Like, I'm okay with that if every once in a while, yeah, every other boss is a little easier. Like, I might be okay with but yeah, I'm I'm excited, and I'm glad it's on Game Pass, so like more people can get into it. That also means there's, in spite of these warnings you talked about, more people are going to get into it and then realize, what is this nonsense? I'm not really down to get my ass kicked for a bunch of loot that I don't care about. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of that feedback, but also a lot of new people that really get into it that wouldn't have otherwise if not for Game Pass. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to check it out.
I think it has two things going for it. One, it's on Game Pass, which is huge. Two, I think Elden Ring FromSoftware kind of threw them a neat little alley-oop here, because it's two opposite things. If the DLC was coming out anytime soon, I think it would really make this game suffer from that. But the fact that the DLC announcement just happened, people are thirsting to hop. Everyone's sitting. I'm even sitting here like, should I hop back into Elden Ring? I don't know. Should I hop back in? And when you have a new game available, I think a new game is always more enticing than hopping into a game you already completed. Just that's how our dumb primate brains work. So I think those two things are really good for it. For me personally, and I think for a lot of people on Xbox, I think people just want to check out a Team Ninja game. They've heard so much about Team Ninja, and outside of what's the Kill Chaos game, Stranger Paradise, that came out on all platforms, right?
Oh yeah, I think
and
so.
that was probably like the worst Team Ninja game of the last couple of years.
That's right.
And we haven't been able to experience a Neo or Neo 2 on Xbox. So I think that's going to be huge for people as well. Game Pass, obviously letting people hop in and not having to worry about that barrier of entry. And you talk about people hopping in and being like, oh man, I don't want to get my teeth kicked in. I remember the day, because my friends had heard me for a couple of years talk about how dope Dark Souls was. It's difficult. I'm having a blast playing it. I remember the day that Dark Souls came to Xbox Live Gold. And all of my friends were like, oh, I'm going to play that game. It can't be as hard as you were saying it was, yada, yada, yada. And each of them got to that first demon, didn't know what the hell they were doing, got super angry, and rage quit and uninstalled the game, which is hilarious to me. And it was one of those funny moments where, like, yeah, your friends, you know how guys are, especially in a group, they all want to prove themselves. And they're like, this game can't be as hard as you talk about it being. And they hop in, and what it is, honestly, a lot of the times, especially with a lot of my friends, you were probably the same growing up, is a lot of them are Call of Duty guys or sports game guys. And Dark Souls very much quickly teaches you this game is about patience and understand. You can't just come in here, hack with your sword over and over again and expect to kill the boss. And that's what they did. They would just go in there and hack, do whatever they could, not understanding like there's a dance to it all. Like you can't just swing over and over again. So that was really fun. And there's probably gonna be plenty of people, friend groups this week that also learned that lesson to some extent on Xbox.
And it's like the combat though. I don't think I talked enough about like the good parts of at least what I experienced with Neo, and what it sounds like is still here with Wolong, is like it's so satisfying, and like it's really gives you that feeling of like I'm just absolutely badass. Like when things hit, when it works. And when you do finish a boss, like it's just so satisfying. Even the moment to moment like feel of it is so good. It's like it's absolutely top tier like combat, like controls and the feedback and everything about it is just like freaking satisfying. It's complex too. At least in Neo, you would have like 6 different weapon types, and then different weapons within those, but also like 3 different stances that affect how you like how quickly your stamina gets used and the different combos available to you. And then just like the upgrade system and like of the new moves you can learn and different things. Like it's a really deep game, and but mostly like that combat is just so good and so satisfying. Really feels, you can really tell the difference when like Team Ninja, maybe their roots are more in like a fighting game kind of style, merged with like that Souls-like style, where maybe like FromSoftware like kind of came out of something different. A little hard to explain, but like when you feel it, it feels just like like arcadey, like Dark Souls became arcadey, but also really damn and difficult. It's so cool. It's so good and unique, really, too. Even amongst all the other Souls like games, this one I think really carves its own path the best. Again, I'm still
Well, it's
talking about
interesting you
Neo.
talked about Sekiro earlier too, because Sekiro is From's closest thing to a fighting game. It's very much about the one-on-one engagements. And yeah, I've wanted to play a Team Ninja game forever because I haven't gotten around to Neo. So I was already excited about this because like we're always starving for a new Souls-like. We always hope every new Souls-like that comes out is really good. But it was your impressions of your time with Neo too that really got me intrigued. And yeah, this setting is always cool too. So we'll see what happens. We're going to get our hands on it tomorrow and we'll have impressions next week. This week was interesting in terms of what we've been playing, what I've been playing anyway. So I wasn't able to touch Atomic Hearts again. Or Hi-Fi Rush, unfortunately. I was able to get in a couple of hours with Chained Echoes. Nothing much there
Nice.
that's of note. It's just, going through the opening hours of an RPG like that. So nothing crazy to report. I still haven't gotten the last 2 characters. So I'm interested to see when they come into the fold because I only have 6 of the 8 so far. But I was sitting there, Dom, and I was wondering, what can I do in the meantime before Wolong comes out? Because honestly, if this game came out as completely broken and everyone said it was terrible, that's the only way I wasn't going to play it. So like... Even though we wanted it to be closer to like a high 80s, and 82 is still more than enough justification for me to hop in tomorrow. So I was sitting there, I'm like, what am I gonna do? I booted up my Nintendo Switch, and I was like, let me check Pokemon real quick. I was bummed at the Pokemon Presents. By the way, we didn't really talk about that because there was nothing much to note. They announced a DLC, but once we have more details, I think it'll be more interesting to talk about. They didn't talk about the Pokemon Home integration yet, which is a bummer because I want to bring in my guys to complete the Pokédex, yada yada yada. I was like, do I hop into Pokemon? Not really feeling it right now. Breath of the Wild. Do I restart that and give it another chance? No, Jerrad, that's dumb. Wolong's about to come out. Don't start a 50-hour open world game. And I scrolled over, and guess what I saw in my hub? I was like, man, I still have this Super Mario 3D All-Stars. Do I feel like playing Super Mario 64 again? Maybe. That sounds cool. Never playing Super Mario Sunshine. That game does not vibe with me. I tried it once, did not like it. There was a game sitting there, the third game, that I had never played before. And everyone always said, Jerrad, you love Super Mario 64 and Super Mario Odyssey. Why haven't you played Galaxy yet? I was like, screw it, I'll pop it open. I ended up playing for like 3 hours uncut the first time I opened it up and loved it. That game is so dope. Like, I don't have to go into why 3D Mario games are good. That's been said numerous times over the last 3 decades. What I will say, though, there is one unfortunate thing about that game, and it is the motion controls. Tilting the control with the star to gather the glitter or whatever they're called is fine, but the specific worlds in which you have to use motion controls to control Mario are awful. The ones where like you're standing on top of a ball and you have to use motion controls to guide him to not fall off the map, absolutely awful. The worlds where he's like floating in the gusts of wind and you have to control him with motion controls, awful. To the point that I skipped those levels to have a single star for you to get. I tried them multiple times and I got so frustrated with the motion controls that I just gave up on them entirely. And it's real unfortunate because a lot of every other world is really fun. When you load it up and you're going for a different star, the different worlds you go to, the way you traverse from little planet to other planet. It's all dope. I didn't expect to get like a Luigi's Mansion in there, which is really cool. Like there's a Luigi's Mansion star that you have to get. There's like some characters from Super Mario Sunshine. I remember like the dumb bird robots and yeah, it's the level design and everything immaculate. Like I said, I don't have to say anything about 3D Mario, but it was really a bummer that I'm playing through this game, having a blast, and I get to the motion control spots and I'm like, thank God I didn't play this on Wii. That stuff totally is like blech. It's like a 9.9 and then like a 4 in terms of the motion control stuff. It's just so polarizing, which has me worried with like if I ever want to get around to playing. Is Skyward Sword the one people talk about with motion controls?
Yeah, don't even bother then.
I hate motion controls, man. I hate it when they're done right. Much less when they're not done right. So it's like,
Skyward Sword actually, because I played on Wii and I hated the controls, and there were parts of the game itself that I wasn't crazy about, but most of the motion controls just like it kills it for me. And that one is worse because it's like all the time. It's not like just certain stars in Galaxy that you have to get. It was like it's everything you do with your sword and half the other pieces of equipment. But on Switch, I do recall. So the remake, you don't have to use motion controls. They have like a new system where you can use the right stick to, wiggle the sword around.
Yeah,
and I feel like that I've heard people say both it's worse than motion controls, and other people say it's much better. So it seems like it's divisive as far as
as
that's
divisive
a better
as the
system.
motion controls themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess at least you have options, but it's just a lot to have to overcome to get to the game, in my opinion. Of like, if I can't enjoy the fundamental controls of it, then like, obviously I'm not going to enjoy the game itself. Even it sucks if there's good stuff buried in there that you can't enjoy. But yeah, it might not be worth the purchase. Certainly, that's the other part. If it was cheap, it'd be different. But Zelda games never are cheap. So
Have you played Galaxy on the Switch at all?
yeah, because I had or I still have a copy of All Stars, and I had never played Galaxy before, and I think I must have got like, I don't know, close to halfway through it, and never came back. I don't know. It was fun. I don't remember. I remember like standing on the ball thing and like hating that, and I got through like
Did you
one
play
level.
a handheld or with a Pro controller?
Handheld, yeah.
Okay, so what I want to clarify too is I've only played it with the Pro controller.
Okay.
So I was curious if it was just as bad in handheld mode.
Like I remember like standing on the ball and that being hard, but I don't remember using motion controls for it or even like gyroscope. Or I'm not sure. It must have been like, I'm not sure how it worked, but I remember not loving
with
that
the Pro
specifically.
controller, you have to tilt the Pro controller left or right to guide him on the map.
Okay, so
And
maybe
you push
handheld.
A to jump, I believe, or B.
Yeah, so maybe handheld it was similar where you would just be tilting the whole console. I don't know.
And maybe the issue is that the gyroscope controls in the Pro controller aren't as good as they are in the handheld Switch, but that's not my problem to deal with. Like, make
Right.
it work well on both
the Pro controller
parts
is,
of it.
that's like an
Yeah.
$80 controller too. So like,
But I have a blast with it. I actually really want them to bring Galaxy 2 to the Switch too, because Nintendo does iteration pretty well, and I'm really enjoying what Galaxy has to offer. But I'm also seeing like, yeah, this was a Wii game for sure. So I'm interested to see what they can build on from that. But that said, I'm really bummed that I didn't get a play this when it originally came out, because what I've come to realize is I love 2D Mario games, but like 3D Mario games are like my shit. Like Super Mario 64, Super Mario Odyssey, and I'm really enjoying Galaxy. Like, I just love 3D Mario, and I'm hoping we get a new one this year sometime soon, maybe with the launch of the new Switch, who knows. But yeah, it's one of those, we talk about our gaming backlog, and like there's games that I want to get to that I haven't played, like Endless Souls or these random ass indie games. Super Mario Galaxy is like one of the, how would I say it, like the list, the backlog you don't want to show people, like the one you're ashamed of, like, I haven't played these games, like I haven't played Metal Gear Solid, I haven't played this, you know what I mean? The shame log, Resident Evil 4, which you got salty with me last week, Rick. You never played that? I'm like, yeah, man. Which is the worst part, Dom. I owned a GameCube. I was one of the 7 people that owned a GameCube, but I didn't play Resident Evil 4.
Yeah, it was good there. So it's especially when it's like a critically acclaimed game that everyone says is great, but it also is in a genre that you like and a gameplay style that you like.
Yeah,
that is really in the. That was nice of the Old Republic for me. It's like, wait, you love Western RPGs, you love Star Wars, and you've never played Knights of the Old Republic? Like, how? Like, how? You know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense. So I had to finally take care of that.
I'm trying to think if I have anything else to mention. I talked about Chained Echoes, Super Mario Galaxy. Last of Us continues to be good. I don't really want to talk about it too much. Like I said, once the season's done, I want to do a spoiler cast. It'll be me and Dom. I don't know if Chris will join us or not, but I want to dive deep into that when the season's over. Yeah, it's pretty much it for me. Do you have anything you played this week, Dom? I know obviously you're excited for Wolong, but
yeah. So we spent a couple hours playing Immortality, and it's interesting. I'm not finished yet, so I feel like there's not a whole lot of sense in forming an opinion until you're done with it, is how I'm feeling right now.
Out of the 3 movies, do you have an understanding? How many of them do you have an understanding of the movie itself? Excuse me.
Not basically there's the one where with the monk Amarosha or whatever, and I think I generally understand what's going on with that, where like she is kind of some sort of demon or reincarnation of Satan, and she kills this monk or tempts him and these different things. And then I'm trying to think what the other movies have going on.
The second one's a detective movie.
Oh yeah, and like all these women are being so weird to this detective cop, like coming on him in different ways, and I'm not totally sure what's going on with that yet. I'm interested though. And then the last one is it's a cat, I think, and then
She's like she plays an actress that's like trying to make it, I believe, if I remember correctly.
And then in one of the most confusing scenes was she was acting. She was the actress on a talk show, like on a Fallon or Kimmel or whatever type thing, but it was acting within the game in which she's an actor. It was like Inception kind of situation, and it kind of threw me off a little bit. But I just got to keep playing and figure out what's going on still, because otherwise, like the mechanics of it, I'm like, well, I'm just clicking on stuff and like watching more scenes. So that's all that's going on. There's not much else to say about it, I guess, except that I am really interested in what the heck is all going on. It just remains to be seen. So probably more on that by next week. But I have put a bunch of time into Atomic Heart though. So it's all right. It's a game, I guess. It's scratching that itch of it. So initially it felt like a lot of BioShock, right? But as I'm going along, it's actually maybe a bit closer to Prey from like 2017 or 18 or whatever that game came out. Kind of feels like a combination where like it's starting to pull off of sort of the really goofy feeling stuff of BioShock, where it's like really over the top, and a little bit more on like the puzzles and that kind of less so like the super fast action shooting combat, especially in BioShock Infinite. That turned into more like a first person shooter.
Interesting, because I always thought that this game was that. So you're saying it's not as you go on.
It's like I'm not. That's part of my issue is like I'm not getting upgrades enough. I'm not getting enough new guns, and the melee is shit. So like I don't really like meleeing anything. So the guns that I've found and been able to get are like not the most exciting. And there's not a lot of ammo. So it's like I'm trying to be like a bit more strategic about the combat, which is kind of fun in itself a little bit, but it's just different than I thought it was going to be. And but the puzzles I really like. Like there's some cool puzzles and they do some cool stuff that with that it's a little trippy. It's a little bit more like Dishonored with some of the puzzles in that sense. So I've enjoyed that. But like there's like an overworld, and you kind of start out there, but then for the next couple hours of the game, I'm just in this underground bunker doing some stuff for a long time, and like, okay, sure, whatever. And I finally get out of there and back to the overworld. Then I get to the overworld, and like there's just I go to the next objective, and there's just like 1,000 robots that like I can't reasonably fight, because again I have very few guns and no ammo, and it's just like, okay, well I'm just running to the objective then and kind of hiding, and like I don't really feel like I can interact with the overworld very much, kind of because of that. And it's just, it looks really beautiful, but it's not super interesting, I guess, except for there is another character you run into that's like one of those characters where you're like, oh yeah, okay, let's rock, you know. I don't want to spoil it in case you come back through, but yeah, so that's cool. It's like, but then once I find that character, then I do one quick little activity, and I'm in another underground bunker for apparently another long while. So it's not as interesting as the overworld. But that being said, the overworld was kind of like restricting me a little bit too, and I didn't love it. So it's like there's a lot of really cool stuff in this game, but then there's also stuff that like is kind of like, ugh, why is this like that?
Seems like it's hampered by inexperience from the developers of the game. Like it feels like they're just making a lot of mistakes you'd expect from like a first time out type of situation, and you know, iteration is what this game needs most.
Definitely big sequel potential, I think. But I'm having enough fun, and I like going through it. If it wasn't on Game Pass, I probably wouldn't have bought it. But it's cool enough, and it looks really beautiful. I gotta really emphasize that because I'm even on Series S too, right? So it should look even better for you, not X. But it just looks super nice and performs really well. I think like some people, like some of the reviews mentioned like bad performance, and I'm like, I don't know, not me, man. But there was a huge patch like the second day after it came out or something like that. So maybe that cleaned up a lot of that before I saw too much of it. But yeah, I think I've got to be like at least halfway down now, something close to that. I do want to probably finish it before jumping into Wolong, but yeah, it's been like a fun enough time. There's some cool stuff there. I like its vibe.
The world
too.
is interesting enough that like I wouldn't mind a book or even a television show or something taking place in it, because I think alternate history is such a cool concept, and anytime somebody creates a version of it that's intriguing, I do like the idea of like a utopian Russia, especially, some of the best art reflects or is a commentary on modern politics or the world. And I think in the current state in which Russia is, I think kind of pulling at the strings of what a utopian Russia could be and the fallout from that would be really interesting in terms of storytelling potential. And I think a lot of their like character design and some of the weird robots is really cool too. You didn't say anything about the thing I had the biggest problem with the game in my hour and a half with it, which is the annoyance of the lead character's voice acting.
Oh, yeah. There's every like third thing he says, I just like shake my head like that's the line that you wanted him to say. You got really? That's it?
We just took the first take, huh?
That's what you wrote for him to say, and that's how he chose to say it. Okay, sure. It's weird. It's almost like they're trying to be funny about it, but it doesn't hit, at least for me. And like, literally, stop saying crispy critters. Oh my God. It's like everything that happens, instead of like, oh shit, or something like that, he just says crispy critters. And it's like, huh?
And then all you remind me is it's been so long since I've had Krispy Kreme, and all I want now is a Krispy Kreme donut.
Yeah, like it's crispy. You can't have like less than like 3 of those at a time. Those things are delicious. But
crispy critters.
It's so weird. Yeah, his dialogue is like bizarre. I don't know.
Who
it's
wrote
just
this? An alien? Yeah.
I'm wondering like if it's like localization to stuff, because this is a Russian
translation
studio,
issue.
I assume. Yeah. And some stuff just I'm wondering if like I think you guys are saying what you think. You're not coming across.
I don't think
the way
English
you think
is your first language necessarily.
Yeah. It's goofy. I'm not like necessarily like holding it against it. It's not like detracting too much from it, because it's almost comical.
It's not the reason I'm going to stop playing the game. I just think it's like it's annoying.
Yeah, it's weird. I forgot about that. And also like there's not many different enemies. It's kind of like the same robots, the same like 3 different types of robots.
Oh,
in that first bunker, you get to fight these cool zombie like things. That explains why they're there and stuff. I won't get to do it, but like, so I thought like, oh, cool, we got this going on too, and probably there's gonna be more types of enemies. But so far, no, it's kind of just those same iRobot, Will Smith, fodder.
That's a bummer. Next week, we might be talking about the potential Starfield developer direct. There's rumblings that that's going to be announced in the coming weeks. The standalone one focusing on that. So who knows? Seems like every week there's been an event or something happening down. We're pretty spoiled at the beginning of this year. We got the developer direct that shadow dropped Hi-Fi Rush. We got the Nintendo direct that shadow dropped Metroid Prime Remastered. We got the State of Play, which was the State of Play. So we got plenty of stuff going on. Next week, hopefully we have some news to talk about, some interesting stuff. That being said, you can follow us on Twitter collectively at CTRLINT. It's controlled interest abbreviated. Individually, you can follow me at Jerrad Wyche. That's JERRADWYCHE. You can follow Dom at Dom Kenobi, but the O in Obi is the number 0, not the letter O.
Which
podcast services. Huh?
I gotta interrupt you because I gotta give, and you'll rarely hear me say this, but great change I noticed at Twitter. That 0 has a little line through it, so it's clear it's a 0 in my Twitter handle. And I'm like, wow, great
a positive
update.
Change in Twitter. We never saw that coming.
They're rare lately, but this was a good one, I thought.
When the best change since Elon's taken over is to put a line through an O. Man, boy, howdy. Yeah. Podcast services, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, wherever you want to listen, we are there. Other than that, head on over to YouTube, search Controlled Interest, I'll prop it up. Subscribe so you never miss a video. Like so you help us in the algorithm, and comment and let us know if you're playing Atomic Heart. Are you having a good time with it? If you're not playing Atomic Heart, are you hopping into Wolong, or what's the next game you're excited for? Other than that, we will catch you guys next week with the next episode of the Controlled Interest Gamecast. See you guys then.